Please do be seated. I am opting to preach from here because I know myself and there's so much room here that I would find I'm wandering out into the street. And that's almost happened before, so we won't even go there. The much beloved Bishop Walter Dennis, suffragan of New York, was visiting our small Upper Westchester, New York parish the day that these readings came up in the lectionary. We loved Walter, always eagerly looked forward to what he had to say because he left us with joy balanced with a firm resolve to live better lives. He was just that kind of person. Now, however, I found myself unsatisfied by the bishop's take on the rich man. The bishop observed that the man living in the lap of luxury simply did not see the suffering humanity at his gate. Just didn't see it. I realized he wasn't offering an excuse for such insensitivity, but his take was that the rich man was just so absorbed in his own life, he missed the importance of what was going on around him. He just didn't see it. I suspect that I wanted to hear a straight-out condemnation of what I saw as sheer cruelty. I would have also liked a nice touch if the bishop drew a distinction between the godless rich man and the loving and generous people of St. Mary's Church, us. The fact that we lived in suburbia where at the time you really couldn't find a homeless person, or at least we had no knowledge of that. And should we find someone ill on the street, an ambulance would have been summoned immediately. We were wonderful people, compassionate and sensitive to our surroundings. He didn't say that. It wasn't included in the sermon, mostly because it wasn't true. But we like to think so. I have vague memories of discussing this sermon with my husband as we went home and commenting how the rich man seemed to get off quite easy as far as the bishop was concerned. If he agreed with me, he gave no inclination. He was, however, senior warden. The conversation turned to his business trip for the coming week and how he had secured tickets to the biennial, the big biennial thing at the Whitney Museum. If you're in New York, I really recommend it. And we absolutely love this sort of thing. And so I have tickets for myself, for our 3 children, and my sister. I was absolutely delighted. Not to mention the fact that there was a reception after the showing, and that really kept the kids rather focused. As the hour for the opening approached, we were to travel from Lincoln Center, where one of my boys studied ballet, and went across the park to the Whitney. This would involve steering the children out of Juilliard around a homeless man who always camped in that certain spot. He recognized me as one who always contributed, and so he came and stood in front of me, blocking my way to the waiting taxi, which was hard enough to get, let me tell you. Generally, that wasn't a problem, but I was in a hurry. And I know I demonstrated my annoyance. Once at the Whitney, we plowed through the crowd, and I vainly tried to keep track of our 9, 10, and 11-year-olds. At one point, I saw something that really captured my imagination, and I stepped back to get a better look. And as I stepped back, I bumped into something hard. And I took a quick look around, and it was a cleaning cart. You know, the kind that you see in hotels? These big things where they have all the supplies in them and the linens and so on. And you would see them in either a hotel or a large office building, something like that. And I was a little bit annoyed because what were they doing with a cleaning cart out here when this art was to be enjoyed? And out of my corner of my eye, I saw the woman pushing the cleaning cart. And it took me a second, and then I gasped in surprise. Her name was Queenie, the sign said. She was a creation of the artist Dwayne Hansen. She was a work of art. She looked so realistic. Now, there is now an updated version of Queenie, but this was back in the 80s, so she was wearing one of those at that time, shapeless turquoise polyester dresses. She looked so real. And I felt tears coming to my eyes. And a woman who was also looking at Queenie said to me, "Oh, I understand, this is so meaningful." And I thought, lady, you don't know the half of it. It was meaningful. And I almost had said, "What on earth are you doing here in this very crowded place?" She was there because she was art. And I had to ask myself, how many works of art that God made have I missed? Have I not seen their reality? Instantly, of course, the image of the homeless man came to mind. Did I not see him for what he really was? Or did I not see the countless others in New York who stood as a reminder that that glittering city had a darker side? On the way home that night, I thought of my patients at the psychiatric unit of the county hospital where I worked as a nurse. I worked in acute adult psych, alcohol and drug, and forensic. And I chose that service and the hospital because I believed that's where I could have the most impact. I don't doubt for a moment that I gave my work 100% of my professional effort. But I began to question how much of my heart was actually involved in this. How much? Did I see them for what they were? Or was I like the rich man surveying the gates to his home, noticing the grandeur of the entrance and totally missing the humanity gathered there? I was so wrapped up in the science of what I was doing. I loved that. I loved the study of psychiatry. And I even went and got a degree in social science and criminal justice because that's what I was dealing with. And I wanted to know more about my patients. I knew so much about them, but who they really were. Years later, I would hear Alan Jones, then Dean of Grace Cathedral, San Francisco, say that people are not problems to be solved. They're mysteries to be entered into. I was great with the academics. But I think that's as far as it went. What I didn't get was, who was this person really? And I could distance myself with medications and treatments and sociological analysis and still be a good nurse. However, without entering into the mystery of the individual, I would never be a healer, never. And maybe that's true with many of us. One thing I do know about this parish is that you do have the insight, grace, and courage to go to the root of most pressing issues. We know that about you. And it's hard work. And if what I hear is true, you search the genesis and effects of our social ills and the mystery of the persons living the realities that are so challenging. It's tempting to solve something out of the checkbook and keep it out of sight. It's just so much neater. That's outreach. That's charity. Even stopping there is good. I'm not criticizing that. But when you pursue justice, as you say in your welcoming statement, that's holy. That's healing. This is memorial, I don't have to tell you, you know that. And despite being a wonderful community of faith, it took me a long time to sort out what I was called to do in my own church. That wasn't a priority. It just absolutely wasn't a priority. We had everything else down pat. You would have loved us. We were adorable. But it was very hard for me personally to get over my fear of really seeing people and letting them see me. And I think that was the problem. It was hard for me to let others see me. I was great as far as taking care of somebody else. But God forbid somebody should see my needs, my pain. But it started to change that evening when I came away from the Whitney Museum. It did start to change. And of course, I went back to my usual way of doing things, that I was going to really get involved in the unionization of domestic workers. That was another way of keeping people at a distance. And years later, I would be reminded by another good saying from Alan Jones, don't just do something, stand there. Stand there. Stand there with the suffering and the invisible ones at the gate of power. Be there, fully, body, mind, and spirit. It is hard to really see people. Because when you stand there with them, you stand there with their pain. But you also stand there with their joy. And they have an opportunity to stand there with us. Amen.